now, last but not least, we have our hero, my co-chair, Sonia Chritton. Without her, we wouldn't be here. And she's one of the most remarkable and courageous individuals taking heat from left and right, TrialNet, NIH, ADS, but is going ahead and pushing what she strongly believes in. And I'm so happy that we started to work together on these topics. And
So I'm Sonia Chritton. My background originally was in business and got my master's in engineering. So I didn't start out thinking that I was going to go into diabetes research by any means. But my son was diagnosed at age 1, my middle son. And that changed everything, and I was very fortunate to have a wonderful mentor, Dr. Peter Chase, and then I got very involved with JDRF and the JDRF Research Committee, and was very fortunate to meet some fabulous people. Like Dr. Bernard Herring brought up the green tea, so that became part of the cocktail. So, of course, Dr. Claire Salzler, the fish oil. So the cocktail, I'll tell you, has been shared since my older son reversed his autoantibodies. So I've been asked to share it for about 18 years, and I've been doing that verbally. Most of the referrals about the cocktail have come from study coordinators and physicians that are involved with PANDA, TEDDY, DAISY, TrialNet, and a lot of them have come from referrals from like influential donors and favorite patients. And this year we got kind of courageous. We had this meeting last year about the same time of year, and we said, you know, we've got to get this message out here. People have been telling me to get the message out, but now we've got these great mechanisms with websites and all that sort of thing, but we didn't have a way to measure it. So this wonderful woman, who's also an attorney and a mother of a child with type 1, last year said, well, why don't you just measure it through Grassroots Health? And I was like, okay, who are they? And she introduced me. And within 2 to 3 months, we wrote the protocol and got it IRB approved. And thanks to Jen and Carol Baggerly, and just really a terrific, momentum. And we set a goal. And that's what we always have to do, is set goals. So our goal was that by our conference, the Children with Diabetes Conference, where we have thousands of families, we wanted to be able to start rolling this out and get it done. So we set that as a goal, and we did it. And so we started in mid-July of last year recruiting. And so I'll go through kind of some of this, but my portion of the talk is really going to be a little bit about recruitment and how we've been using social media. We have wonderful bloggers who've been very supportive, and over 40 Facebook pages that are involved. So anyways, this also, the two reasons we kind of really said we've got to get this message out is two things happened. Last year, or the year before, they said, okay, if you have 2 or more autoantibodies, we're going to call you stage 2 diabetic. We're not going to call you pre-diabetic anymore. We're going to say you're stage 2 diabetic. And a lot of people were very upset about that, obviously, if they're told their child has 2 autoantibodies and it's inevitable, and nearing 100% certainty that in their lifetime that they would have diabetes. So that was one of the things that motivated us to get the word out so that it's available to everybody worldwide. And then the other thing is we really believe that there's no harm in this. This is really a strong platform of health. And upon that platform, anything can be built. So we're going to try something that we don't know if it's going to work, but through the collection of the data through Grassroots Health, we will at some point, and there's no reason not to do this. It's, affordable and healthy anyways. And then, the other piece was we really want to, at this meeting and at last meetings, really reach out and say, to the scientific community, we want to collaborate. We want to share the information. Even though Grassroots Health has their own biostatisticians, I make a point of always copying other investigators, other biostatisticians, and always saying, this is going to be completely open and available to you, so you can compare the people who are on this cocktail and their progression or lack of progression with those that have been in all of these observational studies for 30 or 40 years. So, it's going to be a really great data set when we continue to collect it. And then, so I think that's going to be part of my goal this year is to see what we can do. Oops, So anyways, the solid foundation of health, that's, I think it's the cocktail approach. People are kind of understanding now that these clinical trials are way too expensive. If you have the opportunity to test out two things, you can do it. I worked with Dr. Chase and Dr. Claire Salzler developing a protocol called Nutritional Intervention to Prevent Diabetes, and the population was pregnant women and infants. And we started out with protocol where we really wanted to do both fish oil and vitamin D. But by the time everybody got to weigh in, it was decided we had to pick one of those. And really, we've come to a time where it would have been much more cost effective, because it's so expensive to run these clinical trials, to go ahead and try both. So that's part of why we really need to collaborate, but we also have the opportunity to move forward because of these field studies. And then whoops, there we go. So one of the things that also changed, this is Dr. Eisenbarth's original slide, which I think everybody's seen before, and it's been around for a long time. And I was very fortunate to work with Dr. Eisenbarth. And in his last 2 years of life, he was really coming around to the inflammation hypothesis quite a bit. The new George Eisenbarth chair at the Barbara Davis Center is my son's doctor. And he's doing some really amazing things in conjunction with Gainesville right now. So it's really exciting. I think I'm going through these slides too fast, sorry. Here, let me just I'm not going to use this. So anyways, so there we go. So this is the new graph that they're using. And so the new graph, as you can see, has stage 2, is where you have 2 or more autoantibodies. So that would allow for recruitment for additional subjects in additional trials. And so if the parents have been told their child has 2 or more autoantibodies, then they're given opportunities to try other studies. They just had a paper published on ATG. There's nothing to keep somebody, I don't think, from doing both. So the time to put on your life vest, that came from the family that is on our PreventT1D.org website. I asked her, what does it feel like when you're getting all this information? I don't know why it's changing on its own, but and she said, well, it feels like I need something. I need to do something. My kid's in danger. What can I do? And so they actually worked with Dr. Jody to use the kind of cocktail approach that is discussed on the PreventT1D.org website. High-dose omega-3s, high-dose vitamin D, and some really nice antioxidants. And after hearing Dr. Sears talk, I think we're going to see if we can't get some things to activate the AMP kinase in there as well. So the evidence, you've probably seen this, about how fast type 1 diabetes is rising. Part of why we're doing the cocktail approach and giving these healthy interventions with nutrition is because, number one, there's no harm, but if we can even slow down that rate of increase, that's important. And for the individual patients, like it was for my son, who 20 years later does not have type 1, since the time we were told he had 2 months left. I just wanted to get through his teenage years. That was it. I said, if we could just delay this for 2 or 3 years, get through the teen years, that would be fantastic. He's now 31 and thankfully does not have type 1. Here we go. I don't know why this isn't working for me. There we go. So this goes back to inflammation, and this was really an exciting piece of information. I got to work with some wonderful people on doing a study where we pulled the samples from the DAISY kids, and we looked at the kids who had the highest level of inflammation versus the people who had the lowest level of inflammation. So we looked at vitamin D, and then we also looked at C-reactive protein. And these were not kids who'd had an intervention. We just were looking at level of inflammation. And what we found was that the people who had the highest level of inflammation were the most likely to become progressors and to develop type 1 diabetes. Then the next group we were looking at we called them non-progressors. And so we're running into a lot of those, I think, as we're collecting information at Grassroots Health. These are people who are autoantibody positive and maybe have been autoantibody positive for a while, but we believe that if their inflammation level is under control, they can become we're just calling them non-progressors. And then we have the really lucky ones, like my son Ben, and those are the reverters, where the autoantibodies go away. So anyways, there's several reasons that we think that inflammation and this change is happening. One is we've eliminated aspirin for children, and Dr. Eisenbarth had this wonderful slide on it, and I'll have to try to find it. But it was because of Reye's syndrome. Doctors said you can't give your kids aspirin anymore. But we know from people like Dr. Charlie Serhan at Harvard that if you add that aspirin along with the DHA and EPA, it creates the resolvin 17 molecule, and that's is like a synergistic benefit. And also, the doses you have to take for aspirin are not that high. So that changed around 45 years ago when that recommendation changed. That was also, if you look at some of those slides on how diabetes increased exponentially, that was about the same time as that happened. And then also at that same time, mothers were told not to take fish during pregnancy. And so, it's not flowing through in the breast milk if they're not eating fish. And so the level of EPA and DHA went down significantly because mothers were told not to eat fish anymore. And then the vitamin D reduction, and we've talked about this before, but it is so amazing. The rationale for reducing vitamin D from 4,500 all the way down to 400. That also happened about that same time. Really that 45 years ago, all these things were happening at once, kind of a perfect storm. And then probiotics is controversial. I have celiac myself. We test everybody at Barbara Davis Center for celiac. Every patient should be tested, and every family member should be tested upon new onset, because your rate of probability of having it is, between 5 and 10%. And so I think the probiotics is something I don't know enough to speak about, but people ask about it all the time. And I usually say, talk to somebody like, Dr. Jody or your gastroenterologist. I don't think we have enough data to say that eating a bunch of kimchi is going to save you. But, but if somebody does want to eat a bunch of kimchi or drink a bunch of kombucha and do some of those things, it's certainly not going to do them any harm. And then the BMI and sugar intake, Dr. Jill Norris, who works at the Barbara Davis Center and also works with Dr. Claire Salzler on several papers, has found that there is, with the higher sugar, which goes back to Dr. Jody's glucotoxicity, and higher BMI, there is a higher risk. And of course, 45 years ago, kids are not walking to school anymore. They're not playing outside. They've gotten addicted to video games. So Dr. Norris has found a correlation with inflammation. And then the viral cause, I think, is absolutely phenomenal. For anybody who doesn't know about NPOD, NPOD is one of the most incredible resources for these scientists. They apply for samples of cadaver pancreases and normals, and then a lot of the slides that were shown previously this morning will show the difference in inflammation and also the fact that it's something very hopeful that we were not aware of, which is that these people have a lot of beta cells left as new onsets. So, but I think the time to intervene, if you have a chance, is when you find out you have autoantibodies, or just when you're at high genetic risk, even if you don't have autoantibodies. Families are, again, not going to be harmed by giving their kids fish oil and vitamin D. And then Dr. Ricordi, I think, did a great job this morning about talking about how this translates with transplantation. So if we don't learn from what we're learning from transplantation is helping us know more about prevention. What we're learning in prevention is certainly going to help us with transplantation. Because I've been asked by a lot of people, well, why do I care about prevention? I don't have kids. I've had diabetes for a long time. Why do I care? And the answer really is you have to care, because we are going to learn so much about inflammation and about viruses that's going to help make this transplantation succeed. So you've seen this too many times. So I'm Norwegian, so I can relate to this, but as you probably know, Finland's got the highest incidence pretty much in the country. So again, kind of going back to the epidemiology, what's changed in Finland 45 years ago? What's changed in Norway? One thing is they don't give cod liver oil like they used to. There's Dr. Stena, who came over and worked with us for a year. He's just wonderful. Came over and worked from Norway. He found that about a 70% reduction in the kids who were consistently given cod liver oil. And if you look at what we're doing in our field study, we're talking about the EPA and the DHA and the vitamin D. Well, that's what's in cod liver oil, but it's palatable, so you can actually take it. And if in case you're wondering if there's anything worse than cod liver oil, it's what my grandmother gave me, and that was cherry-flavored cod liver oil. So anyways, kind of going back to that time frame, and going back 40 years, and you look at how it's raising up, I think it's really important. The other thing that came up this morning, I think, and my son was diagnosed at age 1, and is the younger these kids are, sort of the faster they fall. So getting them tested for their autoantibodies, I think TrialNet's just dropped it down to only once a year. If you test negative, I'm not sure you go back anymore. But hopefully with more funding, they'll start testing more often, because what we found with some of the kids that are on the cocktail is things can change much more rapidly than I think somebody realizes. And going in once a year to test your autoantibodies may not be enough. So, the approved protocol, FAQ, we've got brochures back here, and I would love it if you guys took some. It tells all of the information about the study, the rationale, and it has a lot of references in there to why we came up with this. In order to get it approved, we had to show safety. There's safety of using high-dose fish oil in numerous disease states, numerous autoimmune states, even putting things like MS into remission, which has similar genes. So anyways, we were able to prove safety, and that's the biggest challenge you have when you're working with children. And then the other part is, everybody's been telling me, for 18 years of giving out this cocktail is, Sonia, you got to prove it, you got to prove it, you got to prove it. Well, now we have a way of doing that, and that's through the blood spot testing validation. It makes it easy, but it provides the ability to have the people enter their data for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and that includes their autoantibody levels, if they know them. And that we ask about sun exposure, exercise, diet. If they happen to know their genetic haplotype, not everybody does. But we ask all that information. We're going to share it with any scientist that is interested in doing that. And then they get their blood spot test, and we talked about this before. It's really easy. You get your survey done, you get your number, then in the mail you get this card with the four spots. Most kids can do it with just one poke of their finger and kind of warm your hands, hold your hand down, and it's really comfortable. They're doing it in their own home, and then they write their number on the back. They let it dry. I forgot to say let it dry for 30 minutes, and then they mail it back. And then 8 to 10 days later, they get the information. I think you email them, right, to let them know it's in. So it's a really nice way for us to do this. As Jen said, we have multiple countries that are involved, and then we're following up with something that's really interesting, and that is a survey that we're doing separately to about 40 Facebook sites. So what we want to know is how many people are following this protocol, or have been for a while, and what's the percentage of people who are doing it but are not in grassroots health. So one of the other goals for this year is to try to figure out how to incentivize people to do the blood spot testing so that we can gather more data and be able to share that and come to our conclusions. So anyways, I think the most important thing too is just to tell people how much we really, truly support them, and that there's nothing more important than that. But it's and of course we're kind of a sub-study. Dr. Michael Clare-Salzler's very bravely stepped up to be, stand up as a co-PI on this sub-study, and nobody could be braver than Dr. Ricordi, because I know he's probably getting a lot of flack for the fact that we're doing something that's not an RCT. I don't know. There must be something wrong with my fingers. Okay, so these two little girls, the story behind them, they're the folks that really bugged me to put this online. It's a family that was working with Dr. Jody on prevention. One of their daughters has type 1. They went in, and Dad ended up with multiple autoantibodies, and the other daughter did too. And they talked to me about 5 years ago and increased their doses, and they're actively in the grassroots health trial. But anyways, that family is the reason that we're kind of here, because we put it out on the internet, and then again, about 40 different Facebook pages, and then we have bloggers that have been incredibly helpful. A Sweet Life, I think there's somebody from Close Concerns here today, a lot of folks that we really appreciate, because we're talking, some websites have as many as 20,000 people who've joined who get alerts. Some have as few as 300. So the population is growing exponentially, and a lot of people are on multiple sites, but it allows us to do some things that I don't think have ever been done before. One is that we have a Zoom call, and Dr. Ricordi will come on Fridays, and it's a regular call. And with Dr. Jen has been phenomenal. She's been on every call, and sometimes Carol's on. But what we do is we answer questions if they have them, and then we just discuss progress and what we need to do next. So anyhow, that's okay, I'm not sure. There we go. Okay, so this is the big part. So I've been getting a little bit of flack about, we shouldn't be doing this kind of study because it might impact other studies. Oh, thank you. Did I get rid of it? I'm not sure where that screen's coming from. And show?
Ah, that's right, because it doesn't show up.
Oh, yeah, I don't see it there. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So anyways, this is, it popped up again, didn't it? There it went away. So, okay, so the question has been, can you stop giving people this information? And with these 40 websites, with the bloggers, a lot of word of mouth, I think it's impossible. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? So anyways, the ability to share this information has been tremendous. My goal is not to keep people from being in other studies. In fact, I'd encourage them to do whatever study they're interested in. But I also think that clinically, you have to look at what we call the three legs of the stool. Do you think that this research study is going to result in something that's safe, that's affordable, and also efficacious? So you have to look at that and say, okay, without the three legs of the stool, it's not going to stand up. And if you look at other disease states that have been cured, even something as simple as vitamin D for rickets or vitamin C for scurvy, they have the affordability aspect, they have safety, and they're efficacious. So you need those three. So what we can do, though, is work together. So if somebody is in, for instance, the ATG trial or the DQ8 blocker trial, if they're in a study like that, I think it's imperative that we encourage people who are running these RCTs to test for AAEPA and vitamin D on top of that, so they can see what's really working. So if you have somebody who's on this cocktail approach and they're in the placebo group, this is why I'm getting a little bit of flack, is that the results may be, to some extent, different than somebody who's not on the cocktail. So, but again, our goal is to really work together. So, got one more, maybe. Okay, so what's interesting about this, we talked about the Poseidon trial last year, and the start of that is how rapidly these studies are recruiting, which is terrific. But the downside is that a lot of people are probably not showing up to the clinic and going through a blood draw because they figure they can just go over to Walgreens or order the fish oil online or whatever and save the trouble. So again, we just really need to encourage people and the scientific community, physicians, to get people to actually join the study, and so we know what they're tracking. And then I talked earlier about, if you want to get something done, you give it to the busiest person in the room. And when Dr. Claire Salser was here and with Dr. Ricordi, and I just really value his input, and both of them, Mike for getting me started 20 years ago, and Dr. Ricordi for sticking with this when I know it's probably very challenging, and I know he's probably getting a lot more flack than even I am for doing something that's not traditional. But it's not a new thing. It's just new for type 1 diabetes. As Jen mentioned, there's 15,000 people in the overall vitamin D study. So this isn't new. It's a real trial or study, and there are real publications coming out of this. It's just being done differently than in the past. And so now the main thing I want to do is, after this, is open things up for discussion. We covered a lot today, but again, my appreciation to everybody who's been encouraging and helpful. And so, does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Okay. You should be up here with me.
Just sending your contact to someone.
Okay.
Now we have some questions from the community, from the friends that are on Zoom. That we cannot see them here. I don't know why. Does someone know why we don't see the question on our Zoom screen? Let's see. Here. You see the spotlight, mute out. Let's take this away. Maybe if we stop sharing the screen, since we don't have any more. Stop sharing. Now we have chat. There. Now we have the questions here. Oh wow. Okay. I can hear. Marcello Perone from Argentina. This, that. Serbia. Question. I think this is for Barry Sears. Is Jody still here? Yes. There are questions also for you. Are you going to test people for PCB or other contaminant levels as well? Is phthalates another chemical of concern, as they could be in soft gels? So I don't think we are going to test. I don't know if the question for who was the question, but we are not testing people for PCBs or other contaminant levels in the. Is David Bridal still here?
Yeah, in grassroots health, we're not testing either.
Okay. Has anyone looked into flaxseed, 19.5 grams in 3 ounces omega-3, cheap and pollution-free, or chia, 14.8 grams in 3 ounces, or hemp, 7.4 grams in 3 ounces, etc. I think that was discussed already by Dr. Sears before. Yeah, do you have?
As I mentioned, the Mediterranean diet is a diet that's rich in short-chain omega-3 fatty acids. And you can see from the study that came in from Italy that the levels of arachidonic acid EPA are quite high in the Italian population. Relative to the questions of tangentially to the PCBs, the Japanese are the largest consumers of fish in the world today. They have the lowest levels of arachidonic acid EPA in the world today. Yet their levels of PCBs in their blood are near the upper limits set by the World Health Organization. So this is a problem that we're facing, that every source of omega-3 fatty acids, long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, is compromised by persistent toxins.
Yeah, good point. There is one question from Franco Scaldaferri from Rome. Can you provide details on dose adjustment of fish oil during the trial? How often? I believe our testing is done every 3 months or every 4 months during. I don't have the protocol right now. Every 4 months, right? We check the AA-EPA ratio and you adjust. Yeah, it is one of the key factors that distinguish our trial compared to others is that it's personalized medicine. It's based on your levels and not on a dose. So there are some people that can reach for the same body weight, maybe with 6 grams a day you go in range, and other needs 12 grams a day. So that's why also the diet that you do or nutritional guidelines are important, because it's not sufficient to take some fish oil to have a right ratio. So it goes hand in hand with a proper nutrition, but we tailor it once every 4 months. You do the test and then you adjust the dose, which in our experience has been easier than teaching a perfect diet to United States participants, since we have the worst diet on earth. Yes, let's see, questions. Please, I lost where we were. Integrative nutrition. How is done in practice? Further more details on the assay, AA-EPA measurements. So this we discussed before. This is from Franco Scaldaferri. In Rome there is this Laboratorio Gianturco in Via Fracassini, which I know because it's where my wife goes, since she's from Rome, and her children. But in Milan is Angela Maria Rizzo in pharmacology in Milan, and all samples are shipped to Milan, I believe, from Italy. And you heard before that in United States you can send them either to the zone inflammation kit that you buy online, or to the grassroots health kits that does also vitamin D and is available through their website. Please mute yourself. So that was a suggestion, not a question. Okay, many thanks for the great opportunity. Keep in touch. Okay, you realize that in terms of consumption footprint per capita, Norway 66.6 kilogram, Portugal 61.5. Myanmar 59.9, Malaysia 58.6, and Japan 58. China comes 7 at 48.3 kilogram per capita. So why is fish only protecting Japan? Fish is only protecting Japan. I guess this is the fish consumption per capita. So this is a question for Bernie. They say why, like Norway has the highest consumption of fish, but Japan is more protected. So
Actually, there was a study published in 2012 that looked at Iceland, Korea, Japan, and several other countries throughout the world. It's not the fish consumption, it's the composition of the fatty acids in the fish. So the Japanese consume a much higher degree of fatty fish than other populations. So even though the fish consumption may be equal, the levels of intake of omega-3 fatty acids are very, very unequal. That's why you have to basically look at the blood as opposed to doing purely dietary questionnaires.
okay, thank you very much. Can you hear in Zoom the answers from the microphone in the auditorium, or do I have to repeat them from here? You can also unmute yourself now and ask the questions directly from your position, wherever you are. Let's see. Yeah, Jody. These are for Jody. Do you or does anyone there have experience using ozone in their treatment of type 1 diabetes? Second question also, can you comment on the common belief that kids need carb to grow and what truth there is in this statement, if any? Do you want to answer? If you want, you can come down. He's coming.
No, I have not used ozone. Number two is, that seems, the second question is, do kids need carbs to grow? I don't feel like I know all the research enough to answer that. I only know anecdotally that there's a lot of my patients that do eat low carb. There's certainly none that eat no carb. And if they are eating carbs, they're eating whole food carbs, low glycemic carbs. And I wish I would have asked the pediatric endocrinologist who commented after I spoke what percentage she's seen in people that are not achieving the proper growth, because I see the opposite. All my patients are on low carb, and I have a lot of kids that are. So I think we need more research on that. One thing I do know, just from basic science and nutrition, is that there's no such thing as essential carbohydrates. There's essential fatty acids, there's essential amino acids, but there's no such thing as essential carbohydrates, which means that the body knows how to make carbs. I ate a piece of halibut the other day and did not dose, just even though I know I need to dose for fish. And I went up 75 points because the body knows how to make carbs from protein. So just because you aren't eating, quote, carbs doesn't mean you're not getting glucose. So I don't, there was a study that came out just a few months ago that did show low-carb diets were not negatively impacting growth, but yet then I do hear reports, as we heard today, that it can. But one thing that I do know needs to be considered is that high A1Cs also can stunt growth. So I think that, carbs you need for growth is focused way too much, when we also don't realize that high A1Cs clearly stunt growth. So it's a complex question.
Glucotoxicity, oxidative stress, if you have excess, if this increases your blood glucose level. So it's not that much carb or low carb, but is what carb probably you eat.
Exactly.
And moderate, like portion control, but also the quality of the carbs that you select.
Exactly.
And probably the stunning growth articles are like, you see something, I just Googled this because there has been a discussion ongoing also online. And there are opposite position, but it's for extreme diet. Like, should a very young child like below age 3 or 6 go on a paleo or ketogenic diet versus, but it's not like I think a low carb shouldn't be a dangerous thing for kids, or carb control, meaning what kind of carb you consume. Then there is question 3, do you use R insulin with your patients or yourself, and when do you use it?
So our insulin does not have, whoops, my computer's on. Our insulin doesn't have the rapid onset that, quote, rapid acting insulin has, even though I still think rapid is not really rapid because it still takes an hour to peak. Regular will work much slower, and so the theory is that when you're eating low glycemic and meals that don't really create a spike, that a regular would be a better insulin. And the flip side of that argument is that R will stay in your system for 8 hours. And I don't want any insulin staying in my system for 8 hours, especially if we're also encouraging people to be active, right? And the best way to be active without going low is to have not a lot of insulin on board. So I have found that using Novo and Humalog, I can take 1 unit for a meal, and I often spread out my doses. I'll take 1 unit, and then an hour later I might take another unit. So I prefer multi-dosing of the rapid to then not, and I don't want regular, because what if I dose 2 units of regular at dinner? That's going to be in my system all for the next 8 hours, and I don't want excessive insulin in my body. So I still prefer Novo and Humalog over regular, and just on a pump, obviously do the square wave or extended bolus.
So next question is, how many carbs do you recommend children eat per day, and what is your recommendation about diary?
I'm not going to answer that question. How many carbs per day is just such a controversial. Yeah. We just don't have the data, right? I don't know how to answer that question.
About diary, do you have
What is the second question?
Dairy.
Oh, dairy. Well, there's all this A1 and A2 dairy, right? And in certain, this A2 dairy, I think, is what's more common in Europe. I don't know the data on this. But there is some sort of association with higher inflammation with dairy, we know. And, clearly if somebody is having negative reactions to dairy, to avoid it. Sometimes people want to test, and I just ask them, well, do you feel sick after you eat dairy? And they say yes. I'm like, well, there's your test, so we don't need a test. I don't like making blanket statements. So it really depends on the patient, the person, the diet, the family, the risks, the health goals. So.
And that's why the next comment is, I highly recommend working with Dr. Jody.
Who wrote that?
What a great presentation.
Thank you.
Good job, Dr. Jody.
Thank you.
Well, what about my presentation? There is no comment. That's unfair. All right. Normal blood glucose are the most potent method to extend T1D honeymoon. One of the comment of kids needs carb to grow is absolutely wrong. Kids needs protein, micronutrients, and normal blood sugars to grow. Well, too bad Dr. Sanchez is not here anymore, but we'll send her the comments.
I have a comment on what we're learning from these 40 Facebook pages, some of the blog sites and the feedback we've been getting. It's part of why I asked Dr. Jody to come today, and asked her to speak about intermittent fasting. There's one Facebook page that's called T1D Off Insulin. We've got we've got Type 1 Grit. We have a lot of people who have their groups, and some of these websites or Facebook pages have as many as 20,000 members. And so people are trying this, and so I wanted to get her to talk about it because there's so many people trying intermittent fasting. And also my friend Dr. Bernard Herring told me it might be very important to look at. So anyways, that's why I asked her to come here. But the major components of the cocktail didn't include intermittent fasting. That wasn't part of it. But when I went on to announce our trial on these 40 different websites, I had no idea. There's websites for pregnant women. How do I keep my child from developing diabetes? There's websites for some of the studies. There's a ton of different support groups for all ages, and some just for moms, some for teens, but all of those websites are out there, and this is something that had come up. There's a website for type 1 people recovering from bulimia, diabulimia. So there's so many different Facebook pages. If you type in diabetes, you know, it's not just the ADA and the JDRF and children with diabetes that are going to come up. There's a lot of groups that are really growing, and many of them are very passionate about a lower carb diet, not necessarily zero carb, but there is actually one Facebook page that's keto for type 1. So there are people going completely keto, but they're mostly adults. It's not children who are doing that. But some of this that's coming up is coming up just because as I went on to these sites to post about our study, I was just shocked at how many people are trying just about anything and willing to try just about anything. Now what I need to do is get them to get it measured so that we can get the data. So that's going to be the challenge this year, is how to incentivize people and encourage them to join the studies.
Okay. Question. We know hyperglycemia is toxic to normal blood glucose and generates inflammation. Why does your protocol not emphasize normal blood sugar and low-carb diet, as carbohydrate is the most potent determiner of postprandial blood sugar? So I guess it was for me, this question. For our protocol. Our protocol are under intensive. David, here you are. Do you want to answer? We do give recommendation and to keep glucose under control. And speak there, otherwise that doesn't go in the mic.
So all participants in this clinical trial, so again, these are nuances or patients with established disease, will be obtaining standard of care intensive diabetes regimens, either via multiple daily injections or insulin pumps, with a target of maintaining ADA recommended guidelines. So yes, there are certainly glycemic targets that we're trying to achieve in all these patients, and in conjunction with that, we're testing this intervention. So again, they are closely monitored by the pediatric or adult endocrinologists, trying to aim with intensive diabetes care, achievement of glycemic targets.
Okay, then the question is there any possibility to duplicate Poseidon in another center outside the USA? Yes, we do distribute. The protocol is made available. I'm typing up for the chat the link. Where is? If you go on cell like CELL, R like R, and number 4.org, you find, scroll down a few articles, you find the entire protocol Poseidon online, open access, that you can download, print, share, and discuss with the physician at your institution. We already distribute this protocol worldwide pretty much, from China. Here we have Shuminder doing it in China. In Rome there are 4 centers that are looking at it, the Gemelli, Tor Vergata, La Sapienza. In Bologna they're starting, and in many other countries. So it is possible. The Poseidon protocol, Novare is doing a modified version of the Poseidon protocol with lower dose but also nutritional intervention, and I highly recommend we make it available to anyone inquiring, and we're happy to collaborate or exchange ideas or suggestions on how to go forward. Then let's see early. Can you repeat the name of the type 1 diabetes non-insulin group?
It's called type 1 off insulin. So one of the things, if you go on Facebook and type in diabetes, you'll get all sorts of things. You'll get a lot of type 2. But there are also groups like our Facebook page that's associated with PreventT1D.org is actually called Prevent Autoimmunity. So if you just typed in diabetes, our website wouldn't come up, or our Facebook page. But we had over 3,000 likes our first week of putting that up, and real active members on that. And a lot of them do post about other autoimmune states. Like my son, who has type 1, also has JRA, or I guess now it's RA. But anyhow, so that's really important to not limit yourself, but but for the keto and for the type 1 off insulin, it's all about exercise and the things Dr. Jody talked about, and a lot of them are doing the fish oil and the vitamin D. I just need to get them to sign up for Grassroots Health. Or Poseidon. Oh, actually, they would sign up for Poseidon.
Anything.
Except the problem is trying to get them to be in Miami, I guess. So.
Okay, so we don't have any more. There is one more question.
Yes, one question. Well, one statement first. I'm very excited to hear that it's been proven that some of the beta cells are still intact with newly diagnosed. But I would like for Dr. Ricordi to elaborate on the patient that he had in Italy that refused to take insulin when he was newly diagnosed, as well as the case with Dr. Jody, where she referred to someone that went on the vitamin D and omega-3s and proper diet, etc.
Yes, Simone, if you hear me, you can put the link on the Cellar for paper online in the chat. Thank you. This patient from Rome is a 30-year-old subject, and I was in the hospital, I believe was a Gemelli hospital for 1 week in DKA and intensive insulin treatment, and then had a denial reaction and said, I don't want to be on insulin the rest of my life, so just refused to be on insulin as soon as he left the hospital. And he told me against my recommendation, he said, at least take like Lantus or some basal, your hemoglobin A1C will go through the roof, you'll develop complication, you can become blind, blah, blah, kidney disease, amputation, start listing all the possible complications you can have if you don't take insulin. And then he was a very extreme reaction. He became vegan, started exercising like very, very intense exercise vegan, and then very high dose vitamin D and omega-3. But he's been off insulin for 1 year with hemoglobin A1C that went from 8.6 to 4.6 at 1 year, and the basal fasting C-peptide went from 0.5 to 1.0 at 1 year, so double the fasting. And so super anecdotal case, and not suggesting that anybody should try to go off insulin doing the same, but it is a hint to see things that we can work towards and study these cases as well as intervention that are well controlled.
So you mentioned this before, but I know we have a lot of lay people online, and we've been talking about doing the stimulated C-peptide test, with the mixed meal tolerance test, and that's sort of telling the scientists how much your body is still making. To my knowledge, there is not a drug study out there that is increasing your C-peptide level at 1 year to this extent. And again, it's safe, affordable, and efficacious. So, right, like with your transplantation, going up that much, it's incredible.
How is it possible to enroll in Poseidon? How is it possible?
They can either call our phone number, which is 305-243-6070, and I can briefly ask some questions and see whether they qualify or not. Or they can complete the application form, which is online, and they can either scan it to my email
It's online where?
It's in the diabetes research webpage, and it's also I can
So
also
that is www.diabetesresearch.org, the web page, where you can download the form to enroll in Poseidon. Or you can call the telephone number, I repeat it, is 305-243-6070.
6070.
305-243-6070.
In the bottom of the application form, you will find the fax number where it can be faxed, or you can also send it to our emails.
So at the bottom of the form for the Poseidon, you find the fax number to fax it in, or you can email it to the email address. I assume there is an email address at the end of the form too.
There's an email address, but I can also give you mine. It's nxp467@miami.edu.
Wait, what is?
It's nxp.
N
N as in
X-
Nancy, and X,
X like X-Men,
and then P as in
P
Peter.
like Paul,
467
467
@miami.edu.
at miami.edu. So now the entire world, there are 342,000 people online that will start emailing you. And here is her picture also, so you can. Raj.
I want to seek your feedback on the effect. So we know widely that the effect of exercise is very positive in management of chronic diseases, whether, all kinds of chronic diseases, including autoimmune. And we have also seen recently, one of the subject who is a marathon runner became totally off insulin after almost a decade of positive type 1 diagnosis. In light of that, would it be interesting to have a questionnaire given to subjects doing what kind of exercise they are doing, along with whatever arm they are using, and see whether some level of exercise will greatly benefit or not to do that data? And just a food for thought, and see how you perceive that, or have you tested it?
I was just asking Jen about the questions we have on the grassroots health questionnaire, but it's not just sun exposure. They do ask about exercise also. So we'll be collecting that for the people who are in the D-Action study as well.
Thank you.
So I have two questions from two people that did the inflammation test at Dr. Sears Zone Labs. They've got the kit shipped from the online order, and they have a 1.8 score. The wife and the husband has 14.3. They're asking how much, but then they don't have diabetes, they have non-diabetic subjects. But we'll respond offline, we don't need to go into these details. But any other question? So, congratulations.
Congratulations to you.
Dr. Chritton. Thank you all online.
I did have one last question or comment with because people have been asking, what does PREDIRA stand for? How did you come up with that name?
It is is prevent diabetes and its recurrence. PREDIRA.
And in
And
Italian,
in Italian
it
means predict.
What a great name.
Predict.
It's a great name.
Predict, prevent. It's a good name. Poseidon is better. Thanks. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you all, and thanks all the speakers and participants worldwide that join us for this day. We'll wait for comments to see if you want this meeting to be repeated with an update next year, or if you had enough of us. Thank you all.